Welcome back to another exciting edition of Cope. Today we speak to Belinda Carreira, a chartered accountant. But the journey hasn't always been smooth. Belinda, thank you so much for coming on to Cope.
Thank you for having me, Hugo. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Belinda, your story is absolutely amazing. But something happened at 16. Tell us about those years just before and what you've gone through.
Sure. I really had everything I could have possibly asked for and wanted as a child. I was brought up in a very loving family with very loving parents. And then at the age of 16, I seemed to have experienced a crisis of confidence where I felt very insecure in myself. I didn't feel that I lived up to what other people expected me to be, which was completely ridiculous because my parents had never put me down, and my friends had always been very supportive. It's something that happened inside of me that just seemed to break. And I remember the one day I had to get up and stand in front of the class and give a speech, and I couldn't even get the words out of my mouth. And I started to begin to develop all these insane complexes about various aspects of myself, like my personality, the way I looked, everything. And it was then that I started to develop an eating disorder for the first time. A couple of my friends at school, they told me about, if you put your finger down your throat, you can throw up your food, and you can always be thin and you can eat whatever you like. And it was then that I started experimenting with that. But at the time I was swimming, I did have my transvaal colours while I was at school, and I swam a lot. So there was always the exercise element that kept my weight down. But this eating problem developed, I think, from when I was 16, and this insane self-esteem problem.
Did you speak to anyone at this point?
I didn't. And I chose, one of the subjects that I chose for matric was art. And a lot of my artwork for my art portfolio in matric was very dark. And it was all these ghouls and ghosts, and I didn't even understand where it was coming from. It was the stuff that was coming out of me. And my art teacher called my parents aside and she said, do you think that your daughter should go for counseling? She seems to be very depressed. And my mom said, nonsense. She couldn't possibly be depressed. There could be nothing wrong with her. And, so it was something that I kept on pushing underneath the carpet because it was something that there was supposed to be nothing wrong with me ever.
Were you a happy child at home? Did you look happy? Did your parents feel that you were happy?
I think that's hard to answer. A lot of the time I was, but growing up pains, I think when you're a teenager, and I was very strong-willed and I knew what I wanted. So it seemed like I was happy on a whole, but there was these underlying self-esteem issues, and I think I really, really tried very hard to please people a lot and do what they expected of me. And it led to me not really finding out who I was and, doing the things that I really cared about.
So did this feeling of low self-esteem progress beyond 16? Absolutely.
So when I left school, I went to university and I studied to become a chartered accountant. And it was at university that I never really noticed, but we'd go out to a bar and drink, and I would always drink way more than everyone else. And I would, I'd leave the place like really, really out of hand. And it just progressed on and on and on. It was something that was subtle and it was underneath, and I think it was dealing with my insecurities by compensating and self-medicating through the alcohol. And, that went on for a number of years, and it grew into a larger and larger problem. Then afterwards, I went to London. I worked there for 6.5 years. And I came back to South Africa, and I felt so like I had lost a whole huge portion of my life. I wasn't married. I didn't have children. I was 30 at that stage. And, I got into a disastrous relationship. And in this disastrous relationship, I began to take some substances, and, I began to drink even more. And this problem began to really grow into a huge monster of a problem. And I couldn't speak to anybody about it because I was working full time. I was supporting myself, and I was building what I thought to be a very beautiful life for myself. Only I had this massive problem in the background of this, this need to drink and this need to take substance to make myself feel better and to make myself feel good about myself. And eventually it just exploded. One day the whole thing exploded. And, my family took me to see a doctor in a hospital. And I didn't really want to speak about my addiction problems because it was a big no-no, especially in my profession and in my community. So I was diagnosed with epilepsy, schizophrenia, bipolar, and psychosis.
My goodness.
Now, I don't know how you come back from all of that huge diagnosis. And I had it on my Discovery Medical Aid card, there were these 4 chronic conditions at the back of it.
How did that make you feel post that diagnosis?
It really made me feel worthless. I felt completely worthless. And, you know, at the time I had this huge project that I was really running and overseeing. And I was flying down to Durban each week, working on this project in consulting I was at the time. And I had this, you know, all these chronic diagnoses, and I thought, how am I supposed to face my colleagues at work and run a team with all of these personal issues going on in the background? And I was given some medication that made me feel very tired. And I found it very difficult to actually get through the days and cope and manage a team and run a thing with all these personal issues in the background and these mental health problems. And, you know, I was just suffering from, I think, a huge amount of burnout. And it was just unheard of, you know, that how can you be successful, a professional woman in this career and have all these like mental health issues and, you know, have a disastrous personal life. And that was just how it was for me. And it was a really, really painful and terrible time.
So beyond that, what were the next steps? Did you have any support?
So beyond that, yeah, I think the situation got worse. I mean, my career seemed to progress really well. You know, I put the hours in, I prioritized my career above everything else. And I think that was part of the problem, is that I didn't find a balance between personal life and career. And yeah, eventually it spiraled out of control. And eventually my father booked me into a rehab treatment facility. And it was only after
Sorry, Belinda.
Yeah.
Was there a particular incident that resulted in you getting checked in, your father stepping in? Or
yes.
Was it all a
you
process?
know, it's a really difficult story to share because there is so much, I think, guilt and shame and pain and humiliation associated with this type of thing. But before, I was working on a project at a large bank in town, and I would go to the Hyatt Hotel actually and have a couple of glasses of vodka before I went in to do my job. And, you know, sorry, it's just, God, I don't want to cry, but it's just so tragic, like thinking back at it. But I think, I'm sorry, it was so heartbreaking because, you know, I went into the Hyatt and I had this couple of shots of vodka to get me through the day, and because things had really got out of control in my personal life. And they called my dad, they got hold of him somehow, and they asked him to come and fetch me. And, you know, it was just so bad. And he didn't know what to do, and he phoned around and he phoned for help and he asked around. And they said, well, you know, you need to book into a rehab facility. And he drove me to this rehab facility the next day that was far away. It was a farm, a working farm in Pietermaritzburg. And it was really scary, I would say. It was really scary. Sorry, it's to have let people down who have, you know, looked after you and given you everything in life. It was heartbreaking to go through that and to know what it was doing to my family. You know, and just to put my parents through that and my family through that, and to let my colleagues at work down. It was humiliating. It was heartbreaking. It was everything. And I went to this working farm and I was scared. And, you know, I didn't know what to expect, and it took me so long to open up and be able to speak about myself. And I was told very often in therapy that I was superficial and I was not speaking the truth, and I actually got punished. So I got punished into speaking authentically. And it has been a long journey. And, yeah, I mean, you know, that was many years ago, and it's taken a lot of time to work through. So, yeah, it has really, yeah.
Well, you're an incredible woman, Belinda.
Thanks, Hugo. Yeah, so I would say that was the beginning of healing, was the opening up and the admitting that there was deep underlying problems, that it wasn't that I had these mental health issues only, but that I had put plasters on deep self-esteem issues and other issues that, I wasn't addressing my personal life properly. I wasn't handling my relationships like a mature individual. And I really learned through a lot of therapy and a lot of counseling to open up. And I think the biggest thing, to accept myself. And to accept myself for who I am. And, you know, prayer has helped me immensely. I think that there is definitely a power that is greater than us. There is a God out there who brought my dad to help me that day, and who has brought people into my life who supported me and counseled me through this. And, you know, I'm very ambitious in terms of my career, and it's always played a really important part in my life. And I like to be, you know, self-supporting, and I like to contribute to humanity, and I like to do charity work as well. And everything has started to really come together and transform itself in my life. And I found that fitness has played a big part in my being able to stay mentally well. And yeah, it's really, my life has really started to transform for the better. And I've begun to become more authentic with the more people that I've just opened up to.
So what has your source of strength been? What has allowed this resuscitation, if you will, of this amazing individual?
I think the main thing is, bottom line, Hugo, is that I'm incredibly determined, and I have, when it comes down to it, there's self-discipline, but I know that I can't do this all by myself. And I do believe in connecting properly with others, opening up and being authentic. And if I begin to feel overwhelmed and like things are out of control, I take a step back. And I say, this is not right. This is too much for me to handle. And I think another thing that's really helped me is to set up healthy boundaries. And to say, you know what, this is not working for me, or just put up that boundary and say, I'm not comfortable with this. And to take a step back when things become overwhelming. Because I think if you've got ambitious goals that you set for yourself in life, and you're going after those and you're giving it all you've got, you're bound to mess up a few things along the way.
Yeah.
And you're bound to fall down and fail as you're trying to get to those goals. And I was so conditioned that failure was such a bad thing. It was so, you know, it was so terrible. And it's not. Failure is part of the journey to success.
It certainly is.
And I learned self-acceptance is the biggest thing ever, you know, just to accept myself and to say, it's okay. It's not working out today, but tomorrow you're going to get up and you're going to go for it again, and it's going to start to work out. And yeah, it's been like that now. I've started my business Well, which is in the health and well-being space, 3 years ago, and it's finally beginning to take traction and pick up today, after much perseverance, and just after, you know, having a level head and persevering on it every day, getting up and going after my goals and keeping focused.
What an incredible story. We're speaking to Belinda Carreira. When we come back, we will have a self-motivation expert join us for the second segment. Thank you for staying with us. What an incredible story of resolve, determination, and ultimately success. Belinda, I continue to say you're absolutely amazing. Claire, you've had the opportunity to listen to us certainly from that first segment. The one thing that did come up though, that you probably would have picked up, is the issue of self-esteem at 16.
Absolutely, and just to say to you, Belinda, that your commitment to authenticity is so evident, that you allow yourself to speak so openly and so vulnerably about issues that are big and have been big for you and affected you in so many ways.
Thank you, Claire. I appreciate your support.
That's brave, yeah. So, yeah, self-esteem, I think, is, so if we understand it as the experience we have of ourselves, how we feel about ourselves, how we treat ourselves, the beliefs that we have about ourselves, then it becomes easier to understand that that affects us in every single area of our lives, whether it's work, whether it's our relationships, whether it's the way we treat ourselves and the decisions we make. So it's a really core issue, and it's something that I believe needs to be explored much more, you know, within individuals and within society, because it affects every aspect of our world.
So in Belinda's case, there were some telltale signs that were picked up by her art teacher. Potentially, what are some of the telltale signs? How do we as parents or as guardians look out for these possible scenarios and deal with them much earlier?
So there are, I mean, there's a whole range of them, I suppose, depending on the individual. Certainly things like depression, things like the inability to speak authentically, to speak up for yourself in various situations, a sense that you're not at home in your own skin is a big sign. Eating issues, being very critical of yourself, speaking to yourself and about yourself in a negative manner. All of these things can be signs that there may be issues with self-esteem. Yeah.
So Belinda, when you go back several years, what are some of the things that Belinda now would tell a younger Belinda?
It's all a bunch of rubbish. You really shouldn't get so caught up in nonsense. But it's easy to say now that I've progressed on in life and I'm in my 40s. And actually, I was telling Claire it's the best decade I've experienced yet. But I think at the time, everything is much worse than you think it is, and it's blown out of proportion. And what I would really tell myself is I'd tell you, you know, you're perfect just the way you are, and I love you so much. And there are so many people in this world that you can trust. And just open up and share with somebody and trust them, because people are going to help you. And you know what I'd also tell myself is you're going to make it through this. And you're going to do great one day. And life throws us curveballs. And my darling, you are going to learn how to deal with that, and you're going to overcome it.
It's so interesting to hear, if you don't mind me interjecting.
Please carry on.
Now. It's so interesting to hear in what a loving way you're speaking to yourself now. And I would imagine it's very different to how you spoke to yourself when you were 16.
Very different. Self-talk has really been a huge transformer of my life and a huge change of my life. And, you know, I wake up every morning and I do my affirmations. And I do my gratitudes every night, the journal, and I focus on the achievements that I've made, and I acknowledge myself for what I've actually achieved. Whereas before, that self-talk was very negative. And you're right, just hearing you say it, I really got myself into very dark places with the way I kept on berating myself and criticizing myself and pulling everything I ever did apart. Yeah. And it was very painful, and it was so destructive. Yeah.
And I think it's true that we live in a world that is so focused on the negative, that is so focused on what you should be doing, what you should have done differently, what, you know, etc., that we internalize that negativity, and we end up speaking to ourselves in an extremely negative and undermining way. And that has a huge impact on our self-esteem. And I think especially in the teenage years, Belinda, which is when you experience this sort of internal crisis, you know, typically teenagers are forming their own identity, their own sense of self in those years. And so they're pulling away from their sort of family identity, from authority figures. But what are they pulling to? And in the absence of anything else, I think that we go to the negative because we are so constantly alerted to it in the society, in the world that we live in. And that we end up with these crises. We end up feeling absolutely worthless. We feel useless. We feel that we can't get anything right. We feel that the way we look is wrong. Who we are is wrong. Our emotions are wrong. And it's a very, very fragile and painful space to be in if you don't know what to do with that.
Belinda, you talked about positive affirmations, you know, the journal that you do every day. Tell us a little bit about that and what it's done for you.
Hugo, I believe that we eat every single day what the media feeds us, and whatever we're programming, whatever music we're listening to, whatever we're doing, we're feeding our bodies, minds, and our souls every single day. And we must be careful about what we're feeding ourselves. So for me, I'm very careful about what media I really buy into and what I read and what I expose myself to, what I watch on TV. So the positive affirmations are focused on the goals that I want to achieve. They're focused on a position that I want to find myself in, and acknowledgement. Also, you know, you are capable, you are successful, all these good things, because often we don't hear these things, and the media is continually throwing.
So do you physically speak out these things?
I speak them, and then on YouTube there are amazing amounts of affirmations on different topics. So, you know, on building a business and success, there are fantastic affirmations which I listen to every single morning, and also before I go to bed, because it's when you are closing down your active conscious body and you're tapping into the subconscious body is the best time to plant those seeds and reinforce them. And in yoga, it's actually called a sankalpa. And you plant that seed, and in yoga, they say the sankalpa never fails. So that seed will take root and it will blossom. And it's the same with negative thoughts. So I am very conscious of the fact that I plant positive thoughts. And then the journaling I do is sometimes just to sit back and reflect on the day and to say, look, okay, maybe everything didn't go the way I wanted it to go. And that's okay. But how would it have gone if it had been the way that I wanted to go? And how will I improve this tomorrow? And what did I actually achieve today that is well done, you know, and acknowledge myself just for what I've done.
Claire, I want to talk a little bit about choice of friends and the role that that sort of structure plays in our lives. Obviously, at 16, Belinda's friends didn't give her the best advice.
You know, 16-year-olds will give the advice that they know to give. And I'm sure that in that situation, they were doing the very best that they could. Which is not necessarily what Belinda needed.
Correct.
In that situation, So, but I think the people we surround ourselves with is very important. And again, it goes back to what are we focusing on? You know, what are the people around us focusing on? So you've spoken about, the positive affirmations and the gratitude journal and things like that. And I think it does take, and you said the word self-discipline earlier. It takes an enormous amount of self-discipline and also self-worth to know that you deserve having, to know that you deserve to put that effort into yourself consistently every single day, where you're refocusing yourself from the negative onto the positive. Now, unfortunately, often in social situations, it's about gossip. It's about enjoying the drama, I suppose, of the negative. So like, oh my word, you think you're fat. Well, look at me, look at my thighs, look at my, and I messed up so badly here. You think that was bad, and we kind of fuel that fire of the drama, and we enjoy that, and we can really sink our teeth into it. And it's not necessarily constructive.
But something that Belinda's definitely been able to fuel is determination and focus. Now, I know that not too long ago, you were competing in bodybuilding. That is incredible. Would you tell us a little bit about that, please?
That was a very long-term dream of mine. And it took a lot of discipline and hard work and focus. And I'm so thrilled that I did that, just to get up on that stage and present myself in a bikini, and I got my Gauteng colours for it. So I was absolutely thrilled. In my 40s to be able to do that. And it did. It required a lot of discipline and a lot of focus and commitment. And it showed me, you do have resilience, you can push through, and you can actually achieve what seems to be an impossible goal. Now, I broke 2 ribs, which I told you about 4 weeks ago. And, I've been struggling with not being able to do the physical activity that I was used to doing. And it has actually taken a little bit of a toll on my mental well-being right now. And it's funny how just everything fits together into an equation of well-being. And physical activity definitely has been a game changer for me. And I think I always like to take things to that next level. And competing was really just taking it to that next level and just proving to myself, you can do this, you've got it. What you put your mind to is what you're going to achieve in this life.
Absolutely incredible. Claire, now talking about focus and determination and almost the 360 that, or the 180 rather, that Belinda did. What are some of the tools that young people, other people out there can employ to resurrect their lives or to take an about turn?
So I've been thinking a lot about what you said about the physical and that it is so important that we see ourselves as whole human beings, that our lives are not just about school and friends, etc. That we actually look at our lives as wholes and say, well, what are the parts of me that make up this life? So yes, I'm a physical being. I'm also a social being, so that's important. I'm an intellectual being. I'm an emotional being. And that we are setting goals for ourselves in each of those areas of our lives, that we are sort of taking a step back, if you will, so that we get a bird's eye view of what our lives look like. And we can say, okay, so what is my level of happiness and contentment in this area of my life? How do I feel about myself in this area of my life? And what could I do to improve my experience of that area, to increase my levels of happiness, to increase my levels of fulfillment. And then, as you say, to set goals around that, but also to practice gratitude in each area, because no matter how dismal, I suppose, an area of your life might seem, no matter how dissatisfied you may be with it, that there's always something to be grateful for in that area. And so we begin to shift our focus from the negative, from lack, from inadequacy, from criticism, to the positive.
Belinda, thank you so much. Your story is absolutely incredible, and I don't doubt that you are inspiring hundreds and thousands, if not millions.
Thank you so much, Hugo. It's been a great pleasure. And thank you, Claire, for your insights. It's been such a privilege to be a guest on your show.
It has indeed. Thank you so much to both of you.
Well, thank you, ladies. Until next week, take care of yourself, and remember, together we can.